that when it comes to your decision whether or not you just want to have me pose the question or you pose the question. But this meeting will be recorded so that it can be provided later to those who were not able to attend. So our first question, I'm going to direct it towards Vanya. Um, from your background and your experience, being that you work significantly with issues of trauma and crisis intervention, I would like to know, what is your best suggestion for destigmatizing mental health illness and getting past barriers to resources, help, and treatment?
Yes, so good evening, everyone. Thank you again, just echoing what Shanae said, for being here. So when you think about mental illness, there's a couple of things that I try to focus on in my work in terms of destigmatizing mental illness. And one of those things is to equate it to physical health. For me, that has been a huge strategy in terms of getting people to understand its importance. Every year we go to the doctors, or we're supposed to go to the doctor and get a physical done. And there's nothing different from going to a mental health professional and seeking mental clarity. And it doesn't have to be that something is of course wrong with you or anything like that. You could just be struggling with making decisions. You could be trying to plan for the future. And those are all things that mental health clinicians on campus and off campus are suited to do. Another thing that I suggest is to build community with like-minded individuals. Myself being, of course, in this field of human service, we're surrounded by a community of individuals who think the same. But I grew up in a West African household, and so that meant not really understanding what mental health issues are really. And so I had to talk to my parents about that. My mom is in the field, so she understands it a bit more, but my dad, is kind of coaching him on the right language and things to use around folks who are suffering with mental health issues. Because to be quite honest, I don't know about anyone else, but if you are not suffering from any sort of mental ailment in this period in time that we're in, I question what really, if you're being truthful. And so another thing in line with that I tried to do is to use empowering language instead of shaming language. Brene Brown, who is a researcher extraordinaire, she's an expert in shame research. And what she says is shame is basically owning that identity of I am bad, not I did something bad. And so that language of reforming and reshaping your thoughts around that is something that I also try to do. And lastly, is to really be mindful of the language that you use. As I said before, I think a lot of times we talk down to ourselves and around what's going on. And I think it's a matter of reframing our language that we use. So those are some of the tips and tools that I use in terms of destigmatizing mental health and mental illnesses. We can go deeper into that later though with questions.
Okay. So you actually mentioned the importance of language and building community. And in my opinion, I think one of the strongest ways to destigmatize mental health is through conversations like this and being able to really just share your experience. And so Dolores, on your platform, your YouTube channel specifically, Flourish with Dolores, you actually talked about your experience with a bout of depression. And so I would like for you to tell us about your experience and how you were able to realize that you were experiencing a mental health issue and how you moved yourself out of that state.
Yeah. First of all, Shanae, thank you so much for having me and doing this program. I think it's so important. I wish I had it while I was in grad school. And just because I'm going to get a little personal, I'd love to know who's in the room. So if you don't mind, as I'm sharing my story, just drop in the chat, maybe whether you're currently in a program or you're aspiring to be in a certain graduate program. I'd love to know that, just to kind of get an idea as I share some of the tips throughout the day. But I graduated with my doctorate in higher education administration 2 years ago. And, you know, with the whole idea of, you know, having someone push through, or someone who has moved through depression, I feel like it's not like a past tense word for me. I think it's something that you may constantly go through. So I always like to think of it as I'm pushing through, or I'm continuing to push through, because I think that even in the state of the, you know, the country that we're in, and the amount of times that, you know, we have to continue seeing images or things on social media about how we're valued as Black women, those are different things, or that we see, or that, you know, is happening, that can remind us of, you know, how we feel about ourselves. So it's so important, as Vanya was talking about, to shift that narrative and how we think of ourselves. But again, it's constantly trying to push through, because we always, you know, see those images, especially as of late. So when I finished my doctorate, I had like all this expectation that my life was just going to be on point. Like I was going to have everything all together, because I had my little to-do list shirt. Like I had crossed off everything on my to-do list. I had my bachelor's, I had my master's, I had my doctorate. So I felt like, especially as Vanya said, coming from a West African household, I accomplished everything that my family wanted me to accomplish. And I thought, you know, things were just supposed to work out and be good. And I was going to get my dream job and work towards becoming a vice president at a university. And it wasn't like that. And I think a lot of the reason is because when you're in your graduate program, you're working towards checking off something that you really wanted to. And then you have this expectation of what is supposed to happen after. So you go through this, you know, the struggle phase of being in your program. You're like, after this is done, I'm going to be good. I'm going to be good. And then once you graduate, you realize, oh, you know, life just doesn't work that way. And my biggest hope is that after today, I'm not saying you can't have high expectations of your life, but just give yourself grace. You know, don't feel like you have to have this certain image in your mind and it's just gonna be like that. Because I think when we do, I think that's something that really triggers post-grad depression, because it's not happening for us, or our jobs aren't exactly what we thought it would be. So when I finished my degree, I had just turned 27, and with a doctorate in education, higher education, all of my classmates were in their 50s or 40s. The oldest classmate I had was in their 60s, and the youngest classmate I had was 38. So I was 10 years younger than the youngest person in my class, and they had way more higher ed experience than me. They were all white, so I was the only person of color, not only just only woman of color, I was the only person of color. So I went through a lot of imposter syndrome just in my program. But then after my program, I had a hard time finding a job, because as I said, usually people with my degree have a lot of experience, and at that point in their career, they're already at the director level, and this degree is preparing them to become a vice president and above. So I had a hard time finding a job. And so that's when it really started kicking in, like, why did I get this degree? My family is going to be ashamed that I didn't, choose medical, school instead of doing this. So really trying to figure out what my self-worth is or was, and giving myself grace when things weren't happening as I wanted to. And then finally, I got the job that I'm currently in. And I started feeling good about myself, like, okay, life is getting good, like I'm all good now. And then I ended up hating my job, like hating my job from the core. And it took me a while to feel comfortable admitting that. And a lot of it was because of, the way I was being treated, especially as a young Black woman, and, being taken advantage of. And for me, I wasn't always speaking up for myself, right? Because I'm trying to get this vice president job. I'm trying to prove myself. I don't want to come off as like the angry, Black, woman. And finally, what was healing for me was I got to the point, and this is like literally as of last month, I got to the point where I couldn't allow myself to continue to cry every single day, like wondering, why isn't my life going the way I want to? Why am I so unhappy at work? And you know, for me, it was a struggle because I'm feeling like I shouldn't be upset about how I feel at work when I compare myself to other people who, you know, I feel like don't have it as well as I do. Or I would tell myself, well, Dolores, you're blessed. Like, people are hungry and you're complaining about your job. But one of the things that I learned through therapy is that you're allowed to feel. Allow yourself to feel that moment in your head when you're like, you know, I shouldn't be feeling bad, or I'm mad, but you know what, I shouldn't be mad, because cut that out right there. If you're upset, feel that, let yourself go through that. And for me, I wasn't exactly allowing myself to heal, because I would always cut that thought out. Like, no, I'm upset at work, but I could go harder. Or, you know, maybe they should have said that to me. Maybe I'm not smart enough. And we really have to change the narrative and allow us to have the feelings that we want to have. And a lot of that development was through therapy and finding that and really getting to the root of, why am I a people pleaser? Why do I feel like I have to be accepted, or I have to reach this certain status in my career? And the beauty about therapy is, a lot of times you don't even realize that something that happened in your childhood could be triggering something that you're going through today, and that you're still dealing with that trauma unknowingly. And when my therapist asked me, you know, when was the first time you didn't feel accepted? And I realized it was when I was 4 and my stepmom, you know, didn't like me. And from then, I kept trying to do different things to be accepted. Okay, I'm going to get another degree. Okay, I'm going to get a better job. And that's toxic. And so it's so important to really to work through that, so that you understand your self-worth. And it's not, you know, God, if I don't get this job, I'm not going to feel right. It's, you're changing the narrative to, God, if I don't get this job, I know you got me, and we're going to be good anyway. So, you know, I can go on, but I'll stop talking.
No, that was great. Actually, before we go to the next question, and before I say what I'm going to say next, does any other panelists want to add to that, or no? Okay, because when you want something
completely.
yeah.
No, I was just gonna say I agree wholeheartedly, as in the direction of, like, specifically when we talk about when we are going through the process of therapy, like, if you are able to access that, and that's something that I did not touch on in the first question, which I will circle back to later, which is about, like, how do you access things if you're not able to financially. But I did want to just echo what you said, Dolores, in terms of you know, while you're going through the process, allow yourself to heal. Like, that's such a big part of the therapy actually working. Like, because you can sit there and, you know, try to, like, combat the therapist, or, like, make excuses, or do so many things, but, like, if you don't actually allow yourself to feel those feelings, then it's pretty much, you know, you're not getting the most out of the experience. And I had a similar experience, because I am in telehealth right now, teletherapy, and I was literally having that same conversation with my therapist earlier this week. I was like, yeah, but, like, this is not that bad. So, like, why am I, like, complaining? Why am I feeling this way? But it's like, no, actually, I have a right to feel the way I feel. And I just think that that's so important for you to just own that part of the process. So I just wanted to, like, echo that and stamp it.
It's that whole Black woman superhero syndrome, where we feel like when shit gets real for us, we're supposed to be able to take it. We're supposed to be the strong ones for our family or for ourselves. When it hurts, like, your feelings are hurt, you're not happy, like, allow yourself to feel that.
Exactly.
Yeah. So I just wanted to add to what Dolores said in terms of a takeaway pointer for you all, or something you want to look into, which is the concept of confirmation bias. And that's something that Dolores actually kind of touched on when she talked about childhood triggers, and that her fear of rejection, or her desire to be accepted, led her to do other things. And oftentimes what happens is, when we operate from that place of fear or that emotional trigger, we end up bringing about exactly what we don't want to happen. And then it becomes a confirmation bias, where we believe, well, it's because I wasn't accepted that this happened, when in actuality, it was because we were trying to be accepted. So that's definitely something that you all should look into, is confirmation bias, and see where you can identify that in your own life, where you are working to avoid an outcome, and as a result of that, actually bring about that outcome. But I wanted to turn to our next panelist, Lauren. Dolores actually mentioned, having that checklist, and Lauren is someone I feel like she just has the ultimate checklist. All of our panelists are extremely accomplished. I want to point that out. But when it comes to Lauren, I just feel like she is someone who finds a way to do it all. She is an attorney who just left a big firm here in New Jersey and is now working in higher ed at Howard University. But again, she still is the owner of a consulting company, as well as the founder of a mentoring program, all of which she continues to run herself while making this big transition. And so I would like to know, how do you handle it all? What kind of measures do you take to be able to do what you are doing in the midst of everything, and to make sure that you are mentally, emotionally, and spiritually good? And how do you get back when you fall off?
Yeah. So when you say all of it, it sounds crazy, because I'm like, who is this person, right? And I think one of the things that I kind of want to like demystify, and it's something that I've kind of been like working on, is like, I've always been looked at the person that does it all, right? But I also want to be honest and say I don't like doing it all at the same time, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's something very real that I think people I'm sorry, I'm laughing at Evelina. That I think I want people to kind of understand, right? So I do balance these three major things. And like, let's be real. Like, I also was doing all of this in the past month, well, in August, while moving, while changing jobs, while hosting an entire month series, of which Dolores is a part of, for my nonprofit organization, right? Like, it is a lot. And I'm not even going to lie. Like, I think there are times where I have to sit down and be like, girl, are you certifiably insane? And if so, how do we fix this? And I've had that moment, and I've had those moments in my life more than a little bit. And so I think when it comes to balancing, I think, if I'm honest with you, every week I'm trying to figure it out. Like, every week I'm trying to figure out, how do I balance something? I think one thing that I've done, particularly during the pandemic, because that just kind of added a whole layer to all of these, right? I had to be honest with myself, like, girl, you cannot focus on everything at the same time, because there was a period in my life when I was trying to. And I was driving myself crazy, because like, those are the three things you named. You named that I was like the fellowship director for Miss JD, that I was doing Walker's Legacy as their city director, that I'm still in a sorority, that I have a whole relationship, that I have family, you know what I'm saying? Like, there are all these extra added elements to my life that at some point I was like, a ball is gonna drop somewhere. And I'm gonna be honest, like, I can make it look cute on social media. Like, I can make it look professional and I can make it look easy, but it is not, right? There's something that often it got neglected, and oftentimes that something was me. And so when I started realizing that, I had to take a step back and be like, okay, girl, we can't do this, because it's one thing to be on your list, but it's another thing to be the last person on your list. And I found myself often being the last person on my list. So for me, therapy is my saving grace. I am very vocal about the fact that I go to therapy. I do not care what people think about it. It is the thing that keeps me grounded. And like, when I moved to DC in August, I was out of therapy pretty much for the whole month of August and the whole month of September. And I felt it. Like, I felt the difference. And so thank God, I found me a little therapist out here now. We started Saturday. But like, that I realized that was my outlet. I also realized that I'm at a point in my life where it's like, all right, August is where I was doing all my Imani focus. So I ran this program for girls. We were getting things ready because we had to switch our fundraising event virtually, all of that stuff. That was my August. Now, September, I may need to pivot a little bit because my clients need something for my consulting group. all right, so like maybe the first few weeks, I'm filing whatever trademarks I need to file. I'm, trying to finalize business plans that I need to file. Bet. And then October, I have to pivot back to the organization, right? But I'm learning to be okay with doing that because, as Delores said, like, I used to be a people pleaser. Like, my clients may text me like, hey girl, I need X, Y, and Z. And I'd be stressed out like, oh my God, I have to get this back to them ASAP, this and the third, but I don't have the time to do it. Until one day it's like, nah, girl, communicate. Tell them, listen, I know that this is a priority for you. Unfortunately, I cannot do it till X, Y, and Z. If you can't handle it until then we'll figure something out. But if you can, give me until that moment. And you'll be surprised, 9 times out of 10, people be all right. Like, people will be fine. And that's one thing that I had to learn because I'm so used to trying to make things look perfect and make things look good that I was hurting myself, right? Like, even transitioning out of this job, I was at a law firm that I hated working there. Like, I had the whole stint of seeing a partner's name come across my phone, and before I even opened the email, I was in tears. I was crying. The physical anxiety started to manifest itself, and that's when I had to be like, girl, you were last on your list and you need to be first. And that's literally been my approach to balancing. If something is going to remove me from that number one spot, then it does not require my attention right then and there. So
good advice. I wanted to open it up to other panelists before I move on, I think Delores has something to say.
You could tell in my face, like, hard as it is for people pleasers to put themselves first because we feel like we're letting down other people. When you do that, when you teach people how to treat you or have a relationship with you, they will adjust accordingly. Maybe the first time they may be like, well, Delores, fine. But then after that, they're gonna be like, okay, so can I come on Thursday then? Or like, you know what I mean? Like, people are gonna adjust in your life. And while you're in grad school, especially those of you who are also working, you have to create those boundaries. That's the only way you're gonna survive it. You have to drop the ball in some areas of your life. And like Lauren said, sometimes it's just one aspect for a month or another aspect for another month, but you have to put yourself first. And they will adjust.
Boundaries. Like, I'm trying to identify takeaway points for everyone, but if you have your own takeaway points, that's even better. But definitely boundaries and putting you first. That is what this is all about. For those of you who have just joined within the last 10 minutes, I just want to let you all know that in the chat section, everyone is putting their information about themselves, what programs they are in, where they're at in their academic journey or professional journey. And also during the Q&A section, you will have the opportunity to speak for yourself and ask a question if you feel comfortable. And if not, you can just drop your question in the chat section. But please be aware that this is being recorded. So if you don't want to be on video, you might just want to drop your question in chat. So with that being said, I want to move a little bit more into what we are facing right now. This is a very historical time right now. We have a political crisis, so to say, with democracy being at stake in the United States. We have a pandemic that has been going on for what feels like forever, but at least 9 months now, in which there have been different quarantine levels depending on where you reside. And then we have the racial injustice that we've seen for hundreds of years, I should say centuries, continuing, but now being more televised and just more brutal, most recently with the incidents this year that were highlighted the most, that being George Floyd and Breonna Taylor. And these are the kind of things that I think really, really take a toll on mental health. I want to start with talking about COVID-19 and how that's impacting people's studies, but then I want to move on into issues of race, because this is Black girl in the legal world, and we do know that these things can affect people of color very differently. So starting with COVID-19, I want to go to you, Delores. So another video that you did, if you all have not subscribed to Flourish with Delores, please do so. But she did a video talking about adjusting to virtual learning. And so I just want to know from you, what tips and advice do you have for students adjusting to virtual learning in general? And how do you establish a work-life balance and self-care routine in this new way of existing?
Yeah, and it's tough, especially because, you know, we're working, eating, hanging out, chilling, and doing our schoolwork all in the same environment. So it is hard to separate. I think if you do have a space in your home, you can drop a one in the comments if you have like a space in your home that you can kind of make that little corner your study space. I think that's so important. That way, when you are chilling, scrolling on social media, you can do that in your bed or on the couch and just feel like you're separating, okay, I'm not in school time anymore. Now it's my hangout time. I think that's really important to be able to, you know, identify a little corner in your home that you can set up to have a study space. The other tip is it's so important to still establish a relationship with your faculty members. So as soon as, I mean, the semester already started, but, you know, as soon as the semester starts, or even when you get ready to register for the spring, as soon as you know your faculty member's name, like go ahead and send them an email. I'm so excited for your class. You know, this is who I am. That way they have an idea of who you are and that you're eager to know, you know, to do well in the course. And then throughout the semester, communicate with them. You know, there's some not so good faculty members that, you know, aren't always responsive or won't be the one to contact you first. So if you try to put yourself out there and contact them first, that could kind of give you a little bit of a edge with building a relationship with them. Also building a relationship with your classmates. So if your classes are in Canvas or Blackboard and you haven't met your classmates yet, but based on, you know, the Blackboard discussion post, there's a certain person in your class that you feel like you can vibe with, don't be afraid to send them an email and be like, hey girl, can you be my study buddy? You know, because we all need support. So I'm sure if you ask someone if they can be your study buddy, they wouldn't feel like they, you know, most likely they're going to say yes because they're also looking for that support. So it's really good to surround yourself around at least one classmate if you can, because with a lot of the programs you're doing, I'm sure, I'm just assuming, especially if you're first gen, that your family has no idea what you're talking about when you talk about school or what you're going through. So it's always good to have, you know, that support, you know, with someone who does know what you're going through. And you could be like, did you see Professor so-and-so saying he really wants us to do blah, blah, blah. That really does help you not feel so alone in the graduate school struggle. Creating a realistic schedule. So a lot of times we're like, I'm going to read these 4 chapters today and I'm going to feel great after. If that's not realistic for you, don't put that on your to-do list because you're going to feel so down about yourself when you don't reach it. So try to create a realistic schedule of what you're going to do. And then also give yourself grace when it doesn't get done, when you have to roll it over to a next day. So for me, I like to have a to-do list. It's usually right here of what are my top 3 things that I'm going to do today. And then if I don't do it, at least it's written somewhere where then I carry it over to the next day and I adjust my schedule. And then also celebrate when you cross something off your to-do list. If celebrating means scrolling through the gram for, you know, a few minutes or eating some really, really good food or ice cream at the end of the day, you know, all the little wins you should be celebrating instead of just focusing on, of course, focus on the day you graduate, but there's so many little wins that you have every time you go to study. The other thing too is if you're not in the right study space, just let that study time go because you could be sitting for 5 hours thinking like, okay, this is the time I'm going to be studying. But if your mind is thinking about what's going on with Breonna Taylor, or if you're just exhausted, that 5 hours that you're trying to also study while your mind is reeling is a wasted 5 hours anyway. So if you're going through that, you know, don't feel like you can't take a break. Take a break, take your mind off of it, go for a walk, do whatever you need to do so that when you come back to study, you're in the right study space. Because a lot of times students will tell me like, but I studied for 10 hours, but how much of that 10 hours was really focused, you know? So give yourself those breaks and, you know, the work will still be there when you get there, but at least you'll be ready to tackle it. Blue light glasses. I feel like everyone has blue light glasses now because we have so much screen time. So if you can get something that can help you as far as, looking at the screen all day, and talking to your family. So if you live, I didn't see anybody drop for whether they have their own study space, but if you live with folks in your family, or if you have friends that are very needy when it comes to your time, this is the time to say, like, look, family, I'm in my first year of law school. It's 3 years. 3 years, y'all not gonna see me as much as we would all like. Like, I love y'all, but this is the time that I need to really commit to my studies. And I may miss some birthdays, but I'll be there, 3 years from now, and allow them to understand what you're going through, and then the boundaries and the space that you need. And then remind yourself it's just temporary. In my last year, when I was writing my dissertation, I was in the library on my birthday, and I wasn't happy, but I was like, this is gonna be the last year I'm in the library on my birthday. You have to remind yourself this is just temporary. So those are a few tips, but I'm happy to answer any questions or talk further about it.
Okay, so one of the things that Dolores mentioned is, trying to study, but having what's going on in society just stuck in your head. And so, Vanya, I want to ask you, from your background and experience dealing with trauma and crisis intervention, how would you say these type of events impact people of color? And how do you suggest people build and cultivate communities of support in this new way of virtual living?
So of course it, dramatically impacts people of color way more than our, counterparts. Issues of mental health, issues of what we're dealing with COVID, issues of what we're dealing with around, of course, racial injustice, disproportionately affects Black people, and of course, Black women being, some of the most affected groups. And I feel like in this era, what I was telling the folks who I am supervising currently, who are MSW students, and who are, just people in my general community, what I'm telling them is to build the community. I mean, I'm gonna keep saying that, and like, it's gonna sound super repetitive, similarly to what Dolores just said in terms of like reaching out to people. Since we are in this virtual, in this virtual world at the moment, something that I have done is like cultivated the space for my interns to like host their own like venting sessions, basically like once a week, in addition to the supervision that we have. So I have, created curated space for them to be able to do that. Another thing that I have encouraged them to do, and that I do myself really, is to join existing communities that exist already. So for me, whether that's through the university that you are in, or whether it's, one that you find on social media or within your group of friends that you have, if it's through the university, I know when I was in school, of course I wasn't virtual at that time, but there were, Black student unions at the graduate level. There are anti-racist or oppression groups, anti-racist, anti-oppression groups on campus that I was a part of when I was in school. And we would not only host events, but we would also be bringing to our administration and our professors the types of things that we wanted to see within the curriculum. So if your university is not really discussing these issues, or if they're not allowing space for those issues, then, I would grab together with some of the folks who are in your classes and try to infiltrate either the existing groups that exist or create your own, because you're paying for your education and you can demand what you actually learn and who you learn it from. So one of the things that we were requesting is like more diversity in our staff, who are our professors. You were requesting more diverse texts to learn from, all those types of things. And some of those things are going to happen immediately, and some of them are going to happen later. Another thing that I have done during this time is to, as I said before, access existing groups. So some of those groups that I can think about off the top of my head are like, these are mainly found on social media. So Black Girl in Om is a really good group that offers a mental health collective where you can join a group and be a part of a community and go through a specialized curriculum. Other women who are going through similar things and processing the same things that you are processing. I've also joined this cool app called Quilt that came across my path just scrolling on social media because it's the algorithm plays to what you're seeking. And so I was seeking community, and that's exactly what came to me somehow through the algorithm. I joined the group, and now there's like a bunch of different conversations that have around different topics, and you have the ability to host your own conversations. And so whenever you have, I've hosted different conversations on like breaking generational curses or my feelings around what's happening, whether it's through the election or whether it's with, of course, like Breonna Taylor and just the constant injustices that are happening and hitting us all at once. Another thing that I do is just, I try to like curate my feed, because if you're gonna be on social media all day, like you wanna be ingesting a lot of, positivity and good things, and things that also allow for space for like anger and rage. So like one of my favorite pages right now is the Nap Ministry. If you're not following them, like you absolutely positively need to follow them like now. They are amazing.
What was that again?
Just pointed directly to slowing down. I'm
Oh,
sorry.
someone asked what was the name of the page again? The Nap? Is that what you said? I
It's
can type it
called
in the chat.
the Nap Ministry. Yeah,
The Nap
Lauren
Ministry.
put it in the chat. Nap Ministry.
Okay.
On Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, whatever. Just follow them and seriously, like, if you can, like, even like put them on your vision board, put the, all of that of their stuff, and I'll provide more resources as well that I have been using to get through this time. But yeah, I would just continue to seek out people who also, one thing, go out in nature. If you're not around nature, I totally I can empathize with that, but if you're not in nature, if you're like in a city or whatever the case is, like buy plants, you know what I mean? Like get some plants, whether they're fake, real, whatever. Of course, if they're real, it's better because it actually provides you with healing energy. But you can also just use the aesthetics of them to provide you with the space of you like feeling like you're in nature. That's something that has really helped me to like ground myself. Because a lot of the times, like Dolores was saying, we're stuck in our rooms, we're stuck in our offices, our houses, period. And so it's really nice to just take advantage of the weather while it's, still nice out, and, get a breath of fresh air, go on a hike, sit by a body of water and meditate. And meditating can look like walking, listening to music, writing, whatever it is. It doesn't have to be you sitting still and saying, like meditating is really just being able to clear your thoughts or focus on one particular thing. And so, again, I mean, I'm going on, and I could, I'll provide some more resources when we send out the link after this. But yeah, I think just try to create spaces within existing communities, or whether that's your friend group or through new communities that exist online. And definitely remember to push into and demand from the institutions that you're learning from what you would like to see and how you would like to feel while you're getting your education, because all of this is new. And the right to be able to ask for what we want during this time. So
thank you. That was like amazing advice, especially emphasizing the importance of like grounding right now, because cabin fever in this age is real. I have experienced it, and it is not fun. Just being, so isolated from people. And so going outside and getting grounded is just really important, especially while you still have the time before winter comes. But one of the things that you hit on, Vanya, was really making demands of your administration, and seeking to have your academic environment meet your needs, not only in terms of your academic studies, but also providing emotional support. And so I want to pivot to you, Lauren, because you are someone who your undergrad experience was at a predominantly white institution, but your law school experience was at a HBCU. Now, my experience, both undergrad and law school, was predominantly white institution. And so I know that experience of having to make demands of your academic institution for them to meet your emotional needs as it pertains to issues of race specifically. And so given your experience at both a PWI and an HBCU, one, what, if any, difference in institutional support do you see? And being on the higher ed side of things now, how would you advise students, especially those who are at a predominantly white institution, in connecting with their academic institutions to create the type of support systems and environments that they desire around issues of racial justice?
Sure. I'll start with the back end question first, in terms of like how can students get pretty much what they need emotionally and mentally. I think particularly for grad students, sometimes it's hard because like the resources that typically are always available to undergrad may not necessarily be publicized for grad students. But there are like grad organizations and things of that nature that can kind of keep you connected as a community. Because depending on, let's say, you know, what you're going through. I remember, so I did my master's before going to law school, and I did my master's at Seton Hall, which was, you know, what it was. And like, there were like a bunch of us, you know, who were Black going through this predominantly white program. So we kind of like created our own little group in a little space, in a sense. So like when things went down, we can kind of like, girl, did you see what happened in class? Or like, you know, things of that nature. So it was like an unofficial space. But in terms of like dealing with race, what I will say, you know, with my law students, I'll take it from that experience. Granted, yes, we are at a predominantly Black school. That doesn't mean we still don't feel the weight of, you know, what is going on in the world, right? Our students still need space. And while we have directors of, you know, student affairs, or while, even though I'm a career counselor, I may sit and have these conversations with them, we still kind of encourage them to have access to the mental health counselors on main campus that are generally predominantly for or marketed to the undergrad students. But in PWI institutions, they probably still have the same thing. Now, the caveat may be that they may have one, if any, person that looks like you, right? Mm-hmm. And I think when you see something like that as a grad student, what you can do is say, listen, you know, not only for my well-being, but for the well-being of your undergrad population that looks like me, you need to understand the importance of having counselors that reflect all of the experiences that end up at the school and at this, you know, at your institution. Because it's true, right? Like, that's not to say that a white woman therapist cannot be helpful. However, there is often a very different experience you have with a Black therapist than you may get with somebody that just says, okay, I'm an ally and I understand. So I think that's one way to advocate. Look at the options that are already available at your school. And if the space is not there, leverage that you are in a graduate program, because I think that comes with some type of significance sometimes, to pressure down on the student affairs departments in your schools, or like the administration in your schools, or whoever the controlling bodies may be, to make sure that that's represented for you. And, you know, and if they don't want to do it, create the space yourself, right? Get you and some of your friends to figure out, like, how do I still show up to class in this, you know, space that is probably like maybe two of us, and everybody's ignoring the fact that this grand jury that came down was like trash, right? So like, how do we do that? And sometimes it may be the informal ways. In terms of what I see as differences from PWI to my experience at Howard, Because y'all went to Seton Hall. I think you kind of understand what we were up against a little bit. And, you know, and this is no to anybody on the call, this is not me like trying to deter you from that institution in any way, shape, or form. This is just my experience. I mean, I remember when I was a resident assistant, I was dealing with people drawing nooses on people's whiteboards, right? I was, you know, at that time, I wanted to pledge my sorority, but they were not on campus. I think when I came to Seton Hall, there was only 2 National Pan-Hal organizations, and that was the Sigmas and the Zetas. And they could not understand, well, why did we want to do something different? They were like, you have this option. And it was the fight to do that, right? And like, it was that fight, and then finding other people that may have been interested in other organizations, us literally having to create this committee with whatever Black professor we can find to say, here's why we need this, right? Because there's an experience that Seton Hall is not giving that these organizations will give us. Or the time that I had to get another RA fired because, but like, because Martin Luther King Association was having a program and I was walking behind an RA that, funny enough, was a person of color, just didn't identify as Black. And it was like, oh, the N-words are probably having another program today. That was what we dealt with at Seton Hall. And unfortunately, it hasn't changed. So in those type of institutions that are pre-WI, you have to push back the conversation on race. And it takes guts. It takes guts, it takes strength, and it takes numbers, and it takes coming together to tell this community, here's why this is important to us, and here's why these conversations need to be had, because we are an integral part of your community. We matter, and you're not doing anything to protect us. Didn't have to fight that hard at Howard, right? I mean, I think, you know, I was at Howard when Donald Trump ran president. And literally, collectively, I think the life was sucked out of every student the next day. But our dean was such that she understood, so she created a space for students, for faculty, and staff to come together. That's the difference. They understand why certain things like that will trigger something for us. Even now, with the conversations that are coming down about Breonna Taylor, George Floyd, we encourage our students to go out and protest, obviously do it the right way, become legal advisors. And I think that's the difference, because we're in the legal field. We know how to navigate that a little bit and use our profession to our advantage, but there's no restraint on that. Versus when I was somewhere else, it kind of been like, oh, you know, this is not, you need a permit, or like there was too much red tape. So I don't experience the red tape so much being at a HBCU, which is partly the reason why I decided to come back and work at one.
So I'm actually going to open up the floor for questions, but while we wait for those to come in, I just want to add to what Lauren said, or like just point out some things when it comes to institutions. So I have attended Seton Hall as for a law school. I attended Seton Hall Law School. And I'm proud of my school, but I am someone who is very vocal about the issues that were there. I have a great relationship with my school, and much of my relationship was built on me challenging them and telling them, listen, this is not acceptable, this is not working. I built a rapport with the dean such that when I return, she's always updating me on new projects that they're doing to better, to increase diversity and to better support students of color. But a large part of that is, one, understanding that there are some institutions that will indeed be innately racist, so to say, from bottom to top. There are other institutions or departments within the institution, because I have to remember that Seton Hall Law School is a part of a whole university, but their identities are very different. And so there are other institutions where their behavior is just that. It's a behavior, it's a pattern, and they don't realize. So you have to be willing to muster up the courage to confront them and be willing to open up the door for the conversation and just start with the conversation. And that is how you begin to see change, to create the environment that you want. But the other thing I wanted to mention too, and I guess I will pose this as a question to the panelists, is dealing with those moments where you realize the difference between not all Black people are monolith versus all skin folk and kinfolk. And having, because I've encountered that type of individual as well, who was clearly Black but did not identify as Black, and that can be difficult when you're trying to rally up people to create the type of and supportive environment that you seek. So how do you all deal with that? And then if you have anyone has any questions, you can just raise your hand in the chat section or drop your question down in the chat section.
Listen, I say this jokingly, but I mean it. Harriet didn't take everybody, right? There were some people she was like, I'm gonna just let you rock. And that's essentially the same approach that you want to take. I think it's hard sometimes, and my assumption is most of the people on this call are people of color. It is hard sometimes when you are experiencing something as a community and there are people that look like you that downplay it or deny it. That is hard. But I also understand that if you spend so much energy worrying about those people, you forget that there is a majority of people who understand. And so the only thing you can do in that regard is go with the people who are going in the direction that you want to be in and pray that the people behind you catch up. Like, there is literally nothing else that you can do. And sometimes if it comes down to a situation where you were the only one, then you be the only one. And maybe in that regard, your support may not come from people that look like you, though you would hope for it. But do not downplay your message, because there are people that you would think would understand the importance of an issue, and don't let that stop your revolution, for lack of a better word. I think you still have to press forward with what you do have, because that's literally the only way you can kind of survive this.
Mm-hmm. Well, oh wait, I don't know if anyone was about to add anything to that. It looks like we don't have any questions. Oh, Dolores, a whole word. Looks like we don't have any questions. So just to wrap things up, I'm going to go around and ask each panelist to give one solid self-care, mental health piece of advice for all of our attendees before we end. We can start in order of the list. So we'll start with you, Vanya, and then Lauren, and then Dolores. Oh, wait. We have a question. I'm sorry. Angelique, I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly. If not, Angelique.
Hi, yes, good evening, it's Angelique. My question is for specifically for Vanya, but open to the other panelists as well. So I'm an MSW student in my first year, and typically on the days when I have internship, I have like half an hour to transition from working all day into seeing clients. So as someone who supervises MSW students, what's your advice for those days when you feel like you just don't have it in you to support other people, but they're dependent on you? And how do you extend that into your professional career when your career is to be there for others, and sometimes you need support yourself? So what is your advice in that situation?
I'm laughing because I am really trying to figure this out myself. Seriously, it is an ongoing process. And I think that's something that like social work programs need to become a little bit more transparent about when you're going through the process, that like you're really signing on to pretty much be holding space for people constantly, you know? And that is something that it's something that I think, you know, what I would encourage you to do just in terms of that transition of 30 minutes, I'm already thinking about, okay, so, and there's, have you spoken to your supervisor about that in terms of like, is there a way that you could space it out or not, it has to be on that time?
Yeah, it's tough because this is like, I've already changed my schedule to accommodate it being overwhelming, and this is kind of what has worked.
Yeah.
That I've chosen 2 days where I've understood I'm not going to get anything else done on those 2 days, but sometimes it might have been a good day, or work runs over a few minutes, and kind of just having to shift that mindset.
Right. So what are in your other days of the week are like, do you have any days that you're not doing?
Yeah, I do.
Okay. So your schedule is like Monday, Wednesday, Friday, your classes, and then Tuesday, Thursday is like internship.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
As like half hour from work, and it's like up until like 9 p.m. in the night. So it's a bit rough.
Yeah, no, and I can empathize with you. I think, I mean, something that I do, honestly, I try to take mini breaks during the day, like as much as I possibly can, like whether that is giving myself kind of like scroll time on social media, or whether it's like I've been listening to so many different albums and stuff, whether it's like old or new, like new Alicia Keys album is everything for me right now. Like I am, I'm doing those types of things where I can just like listen to a song that I really like, or take notice of my breath, right? Because if you're going all day, I think you're probably not breathing as much as you should be. Great, like inhaling intentionally, which can help you to ground yourself. Honestly, like take your shoes off, take your socks off, physically like put your feet to the ground, sit down, and and tell yourself like, okay, this is for a time, and I can do this. I channel things back to yourself, like I have the strength. I'm channeling my energies. My ancestors are with me. Like whatever you need to do, like to, to get that. And I know Sammy is in the chat saying, Samantha, be committed to your break time. Like seriously, schedule it. If it's 15-minute breaks, I know we're always on go mode while you're working. Are you physically in person, or you're virtually working?
Virtual.
Okay. So yeah, they don't know what you're doing 24/7. Schedule 15-minute breaks. No, seriously, like schedule 15-minute breaks, whether it's like going outside, or whether it's, you got to eat, right? And I don't eat and work. I'm serious. I'm not eating and working like as much as I possibly can. So like try to separate your days just as much as like what Dolores was saying, like separate your space and have a designated space. Separate the time that you do stuff. If it's morning and first thing you do is pick up your phone or whatever, like that's you and your phone time. If it's lunchtime, that's you and your meal time. Like that's not time to also be doing extra stuff. It'll get done. Like just like Lauren was saying earlier, like put up those boundaries and make sure that people understand, like, I can only do but so much in this moment. I work for an eviction prevention program right now. It's nuts. Like, it is insane in terms of what people are demanding from me. Like, it's like, my rent needs to be paid. And I feel like I'm solely responsible for you staying housed. And that's a lot of pressure, but I tell them honestly, like, look, if you didn't get me the certain information that I needed at this point in time, there's only but so much I can do. So I need you to work with me as well and understand that we're both going through it. Another thing, like countertransference is a thing with social workers and therapy, but I think like also understanding that we're all in this. So I would start off your meetings by saying, you know what, this is the amount that I have to give today. Like I'm coming from a space and I'm really trying to like be here. I'm showing up and I want to provide as much as I can, but I'm running on a 50% tank. And so, you're being upfront, and that's not being a bad social worker or whatever. That's just you setting your boundary of what you're able to do right there. And I see some other people saying in the chat, like, make sure your personal support system is so strong. And I agree with that 100%. Like I talk to my mom every single day. Like, I'm like, Mom, I can't, these people are killing me. You know what I mean? Like it's not an easy fix. And that's the thing. I think we are often looking for magic bullets. There's not one. I think you have to try so many different things and see what works for you. But I think like I would encourage you to one thing, definitely like take breaks, take stock of how you feel when you're doing the work, whether that's like journaling or voice notes or whatever, and intentionally create exercises around how you're going to like alleviate those feelings. Because I could chat all day, but like honestly, like what is gonna work for you is really like curated and experienced for you. Because I don't know what you've already tried. And so I think, you know, that's what I would encourage you to do, and make use of the time that you're not working and really take care of yourself.
Hey, thank you.
Dolores, did you want to add to that, or because
No,
we do have
everything
another
Tanya
question?
said, that 30
Okay.
minutes, that's your time, and do what makes you feel good during that time.
Yeah.
Um, hold that space.
We do have another question, but I just want to add to what Vanya said. One, emphasizing the importance of grounding. That's what one of the things she was talking about, putting your feet to the floor, like your actual feet. A lot of people sometimes think it's weird, especially if you do grounding in terms of putting your feet in dirt or grass. But the importance of that is creating that sense of sensory where you're actually getting a touch. In fact, grounding is a mechanism used in addressing issues of anxiety. Finding 5 different things that you can touch and actually activate your sense of touch. So that's really important. But I think the other thing that Vanya was emphasizing, which I think is an important takeaway from this pandemic, is the work-life balance in its genuine sense. I think that prior to the quarantine, we were in this mode of like, as soon as you get up in the morning, you check your work email. And then when you go back home, you're checking your work email too. And you tell yourself, because you're at home, that you are engaging in self-care and you're focused on yourself, even though you're checking your work email and thinking about all the things you're going to do at work tomorrow. But now that we are actually, everything is at home, you are forced to create a separation between what is for work and what is for self. And I think that's something that even when things start to open back up, maintaining that structure of the division between what's for work and what time is set aside for work and what time is set aside for you, that's going to be very important. But the next question we have, and I'm going to gear this towards you, Dolores, and I think also Lauren, because you always like, I'm not that, you know. This person, Chantel, she said, I have imposter syndrome. I know Chantel personally, but I'm saying this person because not everybody knows Chantel. I have imposter syndrome. How do you suggest one overcomes it? And have any of you have had experience with it?
Yeah. Hi, Chantel. I still struggle with it. Like I talked about a little bit later, I was the only person of color in my graduate program, and then I was the youngest. So I constantly was like, did they accept me because I needed a Black person? Like, just constantly telling myself, like, do I actually belong here? Was I, did I really earn this? And I don't have the perfect wand. I'm still learning in my journey with how to deal with it. But for me lately, I've been like looking in the mirror, as cheesy as it is, and telling myself, like, you belong here, you're amazing. And then prayer, looking back at the Bible, what God says about us and how he labels us, and diminishing the negative self-talk you have in your head, or that maybe people have told you. Really getting into the Bible and seeing, like, God, my nose is running, kind of looking at what God says about you, and that you lack nothing, and that you are beautiful and you are deserving, and reminding yourself that, and then surrounding yourself with friends that can reaffirm it. So I remember when we were coming into 2020, and Evelina actually posted something that said, like, it's a new decade, and I was like, dang, it's been a decade. Like, what have I done? And I like jokingly said that, and she went in on me like, girl, you are this, 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 this. So having like a friend group that can remind you when you're having those moments of, dang, like, am I doing enough? Is really important for trying to overcome imposter syndrome and being a support for each other, especially as Black women coming to forums like this to help reaffirm who you are and how we're all feeling that. And that's okay to feel like imposters, but what are we doing to, kind of overcome it every day? Because every day comes with a different challenge.
Yeah, so I mean, to add to that, I think imposter syndrome is very much a real thing. And it's something that I deal with. It's something that I know other my friends deal with. I think, especially in the field that I am in, it is very easy as a lawyer as a Black woman lawyer, let me caveat that, to feel like you don't belong here, right? To feel that you are not good enough, to feel that, you're only in this space to fill a quota. And I think a lot of it is, surrounding yourself with, people in a close circle that can be honest with you. One, when you are falling off, right? And then can also reassure you, like, but even in your fall offs, you're still dope, right? Like you need those reassurances on both levels. But then I think for me, it's an extra step of like, well, how do I reaffirm myself when everybody's not available? And it's kind of like, what Dolores said, like I have grounding scriptures for me. Like anybody that knows me knows Jeremiah 29:11 is going to be my thing. And that's the thing that is going to kind of keep me moving forward. But then there may be times where I just have to look in the mirror and I may have to put post-its around my mirror with affirmations to remind me who I am. And sometimes you can lose to that because it's life, like you're human. And I think you can't get so harped on beating yourself up when you find that these symptoms of imposter syndrome are arising. You have to give yourself grace. And that is the one thing that I have learned that if I do not give myself grace, nobody else will. And that's how I don't think there's a thing that you overcome it. I don't think there's a cure for it. I think it just happens to us naturally as human beings, but you deal with it and you figure out those coping mechanisms.
Thank you. So this is going to be our last question for the night because we are running up on an hour and a half now. And this is by Diamond. She put a question for the first gens, which I'm a first gen. I believe Dolores, you're a first gen. Am I correct in saying, Lauren, you're a first gen?
I'm a first gen
law school.
lawyer.
Yeah, law school. Yeah, that's what I mean. And Vanya, are you a first generation? I don't know if she can hear me.
No, I'm not.
Okay. But she said, if your family is your only support system, but they don't really understand your process, what do you do? And how do you navigate the stress when your only support is keep studying, stay focused?
You have to expand your support system for sure. I'm from Ghana and my parents just think like school's there, this America, you have access, just study, you'll become a doctor. Like that is just that easy. And I remember even when I was struggling with school with one of my instructors and my dad was like, you want me to come talk to the professor? And I'm like, it don't work like that. Like you can't, like that's gonna be worse. So you have to expand your support system. It's good that you have your family to support you, but kind of put them in a bucket of how they support you. So my family supports me when I need a break and we're chilling together or when they're affirming me, but my mentor supports me when she gives me practical tips to push through. So definitely try to find a mentor in your field. I think I missed what you're studying, planning on going to law school. So you're looking at, a couple of lawyers right now and, email them and see like, this is the type of law I'm looking at, or this is what I want to go into. Do you know anybody who's willing to take a mentor? I really do need a support system. But yeah, you have to expand your support system for sure. I know the feeling, girl.
Mm-mm.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree. Like, I think during law school, I don't know what my parents thought I was doing, but I was like,
girl, okay.
You cannot call me all day. Like, this is not how it works, right? Like, they didn't understand that, hey, I may be in the library till 2 a.m. That is my life now, right? Even when I was working at the law firm, my mother just, well, you can just take a break and go to bed. Who's gonna file this motion, sis? Like, so they don't understand. They didn't understand. I still don't think they understand, right? But again, you kind of teach them how to just support you. Like Dolores said, I think putting them in buckets makes the most sense. And it's okay. And sometimes it's hard when it's your parents, but it's like you have to. Mentors have been my saving grace. The people in my, I have a group of law school friends, like we are like besties. Like, and my group chats have saved my life on many occasions, right? So you just have to understand that your support system may just look different, and it's okay.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I would just add to that because I am a first generation attorney. And one thing that was pivotal was getting involved in the Black Law Students Association. 9 times out of 10, 90% of the Black Law students that are in the Black Law Students Association will be first gen. And so that's something you definitely want to zone in on. And then also seeking, and this is for anyone, whether you're in a law school or not, finding affinity professional organizations. And by affinity, I mean they are denoted by their ethnic background. So you have like Hispanic Bar Association, in New Jersey, it's the Garden State Bar Association for Black attorneys. And then there's like the National Bar Association, which is for Black attorneys all across the US. And so there are affinity organizations like that for other professions as well. There's like Black social workers organizations, things of that nature, so that you can connect with people who have been through it before and find mentors. Because if you tap into those larger organizations, you are for certain going to find first generation individuals, because you're going to have access to individuals who are 60 and 70. So they literally were the first person, not only in their family, but probably from their town, to engage in some area of practice. And so being able to connect with those individuals will help you get through and push through, because they know what it is that you are going through. They know what you need academically, and they know what you need emotionally. So I would definitely say connecting to people. But that's it for the questions. Final words just from each panelist quickly, and then we're going to wrap it up. Thank you all so much for attending. Again, I apologize for the technical difficulties, but I'm happy everything got underway and that you all were able to enjoy and ask questions. So we'll just go in order: Vanya, Lauren, and Dolores, and then we'll wrap this show up.
Yeah, thank you guys so much for being here and participating. I think just final words are to just understand how much of a blessing it is, like that you are already pursuing this great accomplishment. I mean, I think we really need to pat ourselves back on the back a lot more than we do. We need to give ourselves credit a lot more than we do, because the world is already against us. And so why be against yourself? And so that's just big up yourself.
Yeah.
Oh wait, who's next?
Oh, you're next.
Lauren.
Oh. I mean, seriously, right? Like, big up yourself. I mean, I need to do a better job of that, but whatever. But like, literally, my only thing is just give yourself grace during this process. Like, if you are surviving during this pandemic when all hell is breaking loose, you are doing so much better than some people, right? Like, so give yourself grace. Understand that the race is not for the swift, it's just for the one that's going to keep walking forward. And that's all you need.
Mine would be to get to know the real you. So strip the identities of I'm assistant director at blah, 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 and I'm a graduate student at blah, blah, blah. Strip yourself of those identities and use some of your free time to really get to know yourself. Because if you don't, and you've always carried the label of I'm a student, when you graduate and you're done with school, that's when the post-grad depression will really hit, because that identity that you carried for so long is gone, and then you don't really know who you are. So definitely take some time to do some self-reflection and really get to know yourself, what you like, what you don't like, what makes you happy outside of your accolades, because you're so much more than that. And I think when we have those expectations of who we are within the accolades, we get disappointed when it's not working out the way that we would have imagined. So get to know yourself, love on yourself, and give yourself grace.
So I'm just going to ask all the ladies to drop their Instagram handles in the chat room so that you can follow their very inspirational pages. Thank you all so much for attending this event. You will be receiving a follow-up email after this, in which you can actually share any future programs you would like to see, something from this panel that you would like to talk about more. You can also DM at Black Girl Legal World on Instagram with any questions you might have, or fill out the contact form on blackgirllegalworld.com. But I'm just gonna leave a few minutes for everyone to be able to copy and paste those handles, and then we're gonna leave this out. I hope you all have a wonderful, wonderful rest of the week. Remember to stay grounded in all that's going on around us, especially these next few weeks leading up until the election. And in everything that you do, put yourself first. I mean, seriously, that's the most important thing to take away. Thank you all. Bye.
Bye.